In 2025, a seismic shock rattled the very foundation of the American tourism industry. In less than a year, iconic destinations that once stood as jewels in the nation's crown suddenly became sites of deep economic uncertainty and societal concern. Just imagine a world where international visitor spending, once a robust engine of growth, fell by 12.5 billion, an unprecedented decline that sent ripples of panic across the country. What went wrong, and how did America's most celebrated tourist destinations become the epicenters of crisis? The catastrophic collapse did not occur in isolation. Underneath the glitz of renowned landmarks and vibrant cityscapes lurked a perfect storm of diplomatic tensions, harsh tariffs, and sweeping changes in immigration policies. These factors, once distant words in economic reports, became all too tangible in the chaotic decline that met the summer of 2025. As shuttered hotels and diminished foot traffic became the norm, the familiar buzz of tourist activity gave way to the hushed whispers of anxiety and disbelief. At first glance, the downturn may have appeared as a temporary setback, a blip in the economic radar. However, as data began to pour in from across the nation, a stark narrative emerged. California, long celebrated as a beacon of entertainment and natural beauty, recorded its first projected decline in visitation since the pandemic. The state faced a 0.7% dip in overall visitation, largely driven by a 9.2% drop in international trips. In cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, travelers who once flocked to experience culture and innovation now hesitated, weighed down by the erosion of consumer confidence and the relentless strength of a buoyant U.S. dollar. Further north, New York City, a nexus of finance, arts, and relentless ambition, saw its tourism forecast reduced by 3 million visitors. Foreign tourists, who once added a cosmopolitan flair to the city's bustling streets, were now in scarce supply. Experts pointed to a mix of political tensions and an immigration stance that many perceived as unwelcoming. The vibrant mosaic of cultures that define New York was slowly dimming under an atmosphere of uncertainty and reluctance to travel. In the shimmering lights of Las Vegas, renowned for its high-stakes entertainment and unending energy, the crisis hit with a brutal efficiency. Early 2025 data revealed a staggering 7.8% decrease in visitors and a consequential 4.8% drop in gaming revenue along the famed Strip. Hotels, which once boasted occupancy rates soaring above 85%, now struggled with figures dipping to 82.9%. As major markets in Europe and Canada curtailed their travel plans, the city of neon dreams found itself grappling with a quiet despair that belied its legendary past. Chicago, a city of architectural marvels and rich cultural legacies, did not escape the widespread economic turbulence. With international arrivals plummeting by 9% and a noticeable decline in overall tourism, Chicago's bustling hotels found themselves among the hardest hit. In the historic corridors of Boston, renowned for its academic prestige and revolutionary legacy, the ripple effects of the crisis left indelible marks. Projections indicated a 10% reduction in international visitors, with Canadian travel dropping by more than 20%. Florida, long the poster child for sun-soaked vacations and boundless beaches, experienced an especially severe blow. With an astronomical $29 billion loss recorded in the first quarter alone, the Sunshine State's economy faced a dual threat: the loss of tourism revenue and a corresponding reduction in jobs directly tied to the industry. A 17% decline in tourism-related employment sent shockwaves through local communities, rendering once thriving economies almost unrecognizable. Perhaps none felt the devastation as keenly as Hawaii, where the tourism-dependent economy suffered an unparalleled rupture. A staggering 50% drop in tourism revenue painted a grim picture of a paradise in peril. International visitors from traditional markets such as Japan, South Korea, and Australia nearly vanished, leaving behind a trail of empty resorts and vacant beaches. Even domestic tourism faltered amid high costs and a pervasive climate of economic uncertainty. Hawaii, with its lush landscapes and vibrant cultural heritage, was now a vivid illustration of how deeply intertwined economies could suffer in times of geopolitical and financial turmoil. As the data surfaced from these key states, it became evident that the tourism collapse was not merely a series of isolated downturns, but a systemic failure of one of America's most vital economic engines. Behind every percentage point drop were countless individual stories: business owners struggling to keep their doors open, employees grappling with job insecurity, and local economies facing a harsh redefinition of their futures. The decline of tourism was not just an economic anomaly, it was a profound human story of loss, uncertainty, and the urgent need for adaptation. The roots of this crisis can be traced back to a confluence of internal and external pressures. Diplomatic tensions had escalated, and tariffs imposed amidst fragile global relationships significantly raised travel costs. Immigration policies, shifting under the weight of political rhetoric, created barriers that dissuaded potential international visitors. At the heart of the collapse lay a simple but inescapable truth. In today's hyper-connected world, trust and stability are as essential as any currency. Against this backdrop of declining numbers and fading optimism, expert voices began to emerge, offering insights into the underlying causes and potential paths forward. Analyses from renowned economists painted a picture of a fragile tourism ecosystem where long-standing dependencies on international flows met their match in a new era of uncertainty. Interviews with industry insiders illuminated the harsh reality on the ground, a brave new world where consumer behavior had shifted dramatically and where local economies were forced to reassess their reliance on tourism revenue. Amid the grim statistics and dire predictions, glimmers of resilience began to appear. Some local economies, though battered, started to explore new pathways for recovery. Community leaders and business owners alike recognized that the tourism collapse was a wake-up call, a chance to diversify and rebuild in ways that could foster long-term stability. Initiatives proposing regional reinvestment, domestic tourism campaigns, and innovative business models started to take shape, offering a faint yet discernible ray of hope amid the prevailing gloom. This period of turmoil also prompted a vigorous debate among policymakers. In legislative halls and community centers alike, discussions swirled around the need to mend international relationships and revise immigration policies that had inadvertently stoked the flames of the crisis. It was clear that a multifaceted approach was imperative to restore confidence in the American tourism market. The challenge lay not only in mending economic fissures, but in reviving the spirit of a nation that had long enjoyed the benefits of cultural exchange and global engagement. At the epicenter of the crisis, Florida and Hawaii symbolized the harshest realities. In Florida, the loss of $29 billion in revenue during just one quarter underscored the fragility of tourism-dependent economies. The disappearance of Canadian tourists, along with the shrinking number of domestic travelers, left local businesses scrambling to reinvent themselves. Experts argued that without a significant overhaul of travel and tariff policies, the state's recovery might be an uphill battle, one marked by incremental progress and the constant threat of further setbacks. Hawaii's situation, however, was even more dire. The island chain had built its identity on the promise of eternal paradise, a promise that was now in jeopardy. The nearly 50% decline in revenue and the virtual disappearance of major international visitor groups forced local leaders to confront an uncomfortable truth. The tourism industry could no longer be taken for granted. The cascading effects on employment, local business viability, and even cultural preservation painted a picture of an economy in deep distress. For residents and policymakers alike, the call for innovative recovery strategies was not just a matter of economic necessity, it was a fight for cultural survival. As the data surfaced from these discussions, a recurring theme emerged. the necessity for a recalibrated relationship between global mobility and local economies. Business owners began to pivot away from traditional models of reliance on international foot traffic, looking instead toward community-based approaches that emphasized local engagement and regional strengths. The psychological toll of the tourism collapse was equally profound. Residents began to question long-held beliefs about the invincibility of their economic systems. The crisis forced communities to confront the vulnerabilities that underpin modern economies, vulnerabilities that, when exposed, can upend decades of prosperity. In a sense, the collapse served as both a warning and an opportunity, a warning of what could happen if economic diversity is neglected, and an opportunity to rebuild systems with greater emphasis on sustainability and resilience. As the narrative advanced, the stage was set for a turning point. Media outlets, once cautious in their reporting, now found themselves compelled to delve deeper into the crisis. Investigative pieces and in-depth interviews lent a voice to the uncertainties swirling in every corner of the country. Analysts debated heatedly about the interplay of government policy, market forces, and consumer sentiment. The story was no longer about isolated data points. It was about a nation at a crossroads, with each state navigating its own path through a maze of challenges and unforeseen consequences. In this maelstrom of data and emotion, a concerted effort began to emerge, one aimed at not only understanding the crisis, but actively resolving it. Urban planners, economists, and tourism experts formed coalitions to reassess and redesign tourism strategies. Their goal was to create a framework that could both shield local economies from such shocks in the future and transform adversity into an impetus for innovation. Cities and states started reaching out to international partners in meaningful ways. In a series of high-stakes meetings, representatives from the U.S. traveled abroad to renegotiate travel agreements and to present revised policies aimed at fostering a more welcoming environment for visitors. These meetings were marked by hard-fought compromises and a genuine acknowledgement of past oversights. There, amid a flurry of proposals and diplomatic exchanges, the seeds of recovery were sown. Local economies, while reeling from immediate losses, began to invest in infrastructure and community initiatives designed to mitigate future shocks. In towns once overly dependent on fleeting tourist dollars, efforts to diversify income streams through local crafts, culinary tourism, and cultural festivals came to the forefront. Community leaders emphasized that the collapse offered a rare opportunity to redefine success not solely by the number of international visitors, but by the sustainable growth and collective strength of local communities. Within this transformative narrative, the role of data and expert insights remained central. Detailed reports and comprehensive analyses acted as crucial signposts, ensuring that decisions were guided not by panic, but by a deep and reflective understanding of the challenges at hand. As the country slowly began to reckon with the magnitude of the crisis, a broader reflection took hold. The collapse of tourism in 2025 was not just an isolated incident. It was a mirror held up to our interconnected world. It revealed how economic systems, cultural narratives, and even personal identities are intricately bound together by the flow of people, ideas, and capital. In sparking difficult conversations about the future of travel, the crisis compelled Americans to confront the systemic issues that had long been ignored. This reflection paved the way for a new chapter, a chapter defined by cautious optimism and actionable strategies. Policymakers, industry leaders, and citizens alike recognized that recovery would not be instantaneous. It would demand comprehensive reforms, innovative thinking, and above all, a willingness to embrace change. The future path of American tourism was being redrawn on multiple fronts, from renegotiated international relationships to grassroots efforts aimed at revitalizing local economies. Today, as shadows of the crisis begin to recede, there is a cautious optimism in the air. The journey toward recovery is fraught with challenges, and the road ahead remains uncertain. Yet, there is a palpable sense that the collapse of 2025 was not the end, but rather a prelude to a transformative new era. Across the nation, stakeholders from every corner of the tourism industry are mobilizing, armed with hard-won data, innovative strategies, and a renewed commitment to restoring the trust that once defined America's tourism landscape. In the final analysis, the 2025 tourism collapse stands as a stark reminder of our vulnerabilities and, just as importantly, of our capacity for reinvention. It is a story of economic upheaval and human hardship, but also a tale of resilience, a call to re-examine our values and to rebuild in a manner that embraces both diversity and sustainability. Policymakers, act now, rebuild trust, and revitalize America's tourism future.